No one prepared me for this feeling. In the middle of an endless desert, where there is no shade, no water, only sand and burning heat, I realized I was standing in a place where every step could decide whether I live or die. And yet, in the harshest environment possible, I chose to do something completely against survival instinct, to build a place to stay. A space that could protect me from the heat, preserve my energy, and extend how long I could survive in a land not meant for humans. The first steps on the hot sand made everything clear. Each step felt like walking on burning coal. The air was so dry that every breath cut through my throat. Sweat didn't drip, it disappeared the moment it formed. I could feel my body losing water minute by minute. Even though I hadn't done much yet, I looked around. No landmarks, no direction, just endless dunes stretching to the horizon. A place where, if you turned around, you might never find your way back. In that emptiness, I had to create something to hold on to. Not just physically, but mentally. I started marking the build location. There was no perfect choice, only a less dangerous one. I picked a relatively flat area, slightly protected from direct wind. But even standing still, I could feel the heat rising from the ground, as if the desert itself was breathing into my feet. I began digging. Sand is not soil. It shifts, collapses, refuses to hold anything in place. Every attempt to create a stable base failed. That forced me to rethink everything. I couldn't build like normal. I couldn't rely on the ground. I had to lift the structure above it, piece by piece. The bamboo went into place. Every knot tightened carefully. I moved slowly, but precisely. There was no room for error. Out here, a mistake doesn't just ruin the build, it can take away your chance to survive. The sun climbed higher. The light stopped being just light. It became pressure. It pushed down on my body, making everything heavier. My heart rate increased. My breathing shortened. My body was reacting. At one point, I had to stop. Not because I wanted to rest, but because if I didn't, I might collapse right there. I sat on the sand, but it was too hot. I had to stand up again. There was no real place to rest. No safe spot. I took a small sip of water, very small. I held it in my mouth for a moment before swallowing, trying to stretch that feeling of relief. I didn't know how long I would need to last out here. I stood up, continued, step by step, bamboo by bamboo, rope by rope. A small structure began to form, a raised floor above the sand. That made a difference, small, but critical. The heat from below reduced. Air started to move beneath me. For the first time, I felt a slight sense of relief. But the desert doesn't let things stay easy. The wind started rising, not a gentle breeze, but sand-filled gusts sweeping across everything. Sand hit my eyes, my mouth, every exposed surface. I had to turn away, close my eyes just to keep them functioning. The structure began to shake. The bamboo creaked under pressure. I rushed to secure the joints, checking every connection. If one failed, everything could collapse. The wind grew stronger. I had to use my entire body just to stay balanced. Not just holding the structure, but holding myself. Sand hit my skin like hundreds of tiny needles. My eyes burned. My throat dried even more. But I couldn't let go. That moment didn't last long, but it was enough. Enough to remind me I was not in control. When the wind finally eased, I checked everything. Some joints loosened. Some parts shifted. I fixed them. Slower. Stronger. I was no longer building fast. I was building to survive. When the first shade appeared beneath the structure, I stepped into it. It wasn't cool, but it reduced the pressure from the sun. I stood there for a few minutes, breathing deeper, letting my body stabilize. That moment felt like a reward. Not big, but enough to continue. I looked up at the unfinished frame. knowing there was still a long way to go, but at least I had started creating the difference between survival and failure. Day 2 didn't feel like day 1. My body was heavier, slower, and less responsive. The moment I opened my eyes, I felt the lack of energy. Not normal fatigue, but the kind that makes you think before even standing up. I sat still for a few seconds, trying to breathe deeply. But the dry air made every inhale feel like swallowing sand. I looked at my remaining water. Less than expected. That changed everything. This was no longer just a challenge. It was a race against time. If I didn't finish fast enough to create a livable space, I wouldn't last long enough to leave. I stood up. Not slowly like yesterday, but not recklessly either. I had to move faster while staying controlled. A very difficult balance. I continued building upward. The second level. Higher, more open, but more dangerous. Every step felt unstable. The structure wasn't fully secure yet, and I could feel it. The sun rose faster than I expected. The light became blinding. I had to squint constantly. My head started aching. A dull pain, growing stronger by the hour. As I tied the bamboo together, my hands began to shake slightly. Not from fear, but dehydration. Every knot required focus. I didn't have the strength to redo mistakes. At one point, while standing on the upper frame, I looked down. It wasn't the height that scared me, it was the dizziness. The world shifted slightly. I grabbed onto the frame, closed my eyes for a few seconds. If I lost balance here, I could fall. And in this condition, one fall would be enough. I took another sip of water. Bigger this time. I knew I was taking a risk. But without it, I wouldn't stay conscious enough to continue. I kept going. The walls began to take shape. The interior became clearer. The shade expanded. I could feel a real difference between outside and inside now. Outside was brutal. Inside was survivable, but the desert wasn't done. In the afternoon, the wind grew stronger. Not just gusts anymore, but a full sandstorm. I saw it coming. A wall of dust and sand in the distance, moving steadily toward me. I couldn't run. There was nowhere to go. I had to prepare. I reinforced everything. Tightened every weak point. Checked every knot. Everything had to hold. Then it hit, unlike anything before. Sand filled the air so thick I could barely see. Breathing became difficult. I covered my face, trying to breathe through fabric. The structure shook violently. Bamboo slammed against bamboo with terrifying sounds. I held on, didn't move, didn't think, just held. The storm lasted longer than expected. Each minute stretched endlessly. My arms burned. My body weakened. But I couldn't let go. If I let go, it was over. Eventually, the wind slowed. I opened my eyes. Everything was covered in sand. Parts of the structure had shifted. Some bamboo had come loose. I stood there for a few seconds, doing nothing, just breathing. Then I started again. No choice. I repaired everything. Slower. Stronger. I wasn't building for beauty anymore. I was building for survival. As the sun set, the temperature dropped quickly. The wind calmed. I sat inside the structure. For the first time, I stopped thinking about building. I started thinking about surviving. The final day didn't begin with sunlight, but with an unusual stillness. No wind. No shifting sand. Just a silence so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. A different kind of stillness. Not peaceful, but waiting. My body felt lighter, not because I had recovered, but because I had almost no energy left for strong reactions. Every movement was calculated. Every action had purpose. I looked at the structure. Not perfect, not beautiful, but standing. And more importantly, it kept me alive this far. I began finishing the last part. The upper roof. Protection from direct sunlight. I tied each piece with full focus. No mistakes. No second chances. The sun rose, but this time it didn't feel like an enemy. I stood under the roof. The light was still strong, but no longer crushing. The interior felt noticeably cooler. Air flowed better. I could breathe deeply without my throat burning. I sat down. No rush. No panic. Just feeling. For the first time since I started, I felt in control of something. Not the desert, but myself. I stepped outside. Looked around. Everything was still the same. Sand. Sun. Endless emptiness. But I no longer felt consumed by it. I turned back to the structure. Something that shouldn't exist now stood in the middle of nowhere. I climbed to the upper level. The view expanded. Wider. Clearer. The wind blew lightly. The structure moved slightly. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I stood there. No holding. No hesitation. Just standing. And I realized the most dangerous thing wasn't the desert. It was the moment you believe you can't continue. I had passed that moment, and everything after that was just the result.